Well, the fun police are at it again. The Moomba parade is the latest victim of what I would argue is safety culture gone mad. Here to talk with me about it is former Acting Senior Sergeant Krystle Mitchell. Krystle, how are you?
I'm great, Toph. How are you?
I'm doing very well. You have worked many a public event over your many years in the police force. You've seen large crowds of people. You've seen the fun ones out enjoying themselves. You've seen the rough ones out perhaps for the wrong reasons. You've seen it all. What's your take on this tweet from the City of Melbourne saying it is with great regret that they had to make the difficult decision to cancel the Moomba parade due to extreme heat?
I was really disappointed, but I was not surprised. It
Mm.
certainly seems to be the next very specific campaign to limit people, I suppose, in their behaviour. And we are seeing with the climate change narrative that they are using fear to encourage people to do the right thing, stay at home, and reduce your carbon footprint.
Well,
And
that
that's what I think is happening. I think that this is a precursor to climate lockdowns.
Well, that sounds all very conspiratorial there, Krystle. You're not a
It
conspiracy
does.
theorist, are you? Well, this, of course, was reported. The Guardian says Melbourne's Moomba parade was cancelled due to heat, as festival goers in Victoria were advised to leave amid fire warnings. The festival situation seemed like just an absolute palaver, the communication between festival operators and their own patrons, and it would appear the management of that traffic situation. I was lucky enough to get out of the Black Saturday fires unawares of what was happening behind me, but I was actually in Kinglake less than a half hour before the fires ripped through there. I was there because a police officer directed me in that direction, saying it wasn't safe to go down the Hume Highway, which is how I was going to go home from a track day in Broadford. Communication is paramount in these situations, and it just seems like we've learnt nothing from Black Saturday and we don't have good communication in place.
I would agree with that. There's definitely some concern around the lack of communication and the lack of decision making. But dare I say it, Toph, maybe the reason that they didn't make the call was because they can't rely on the weather prediction 3 days out in advance for them to make that decision. But we both know it wasn't that hot. We both know that we've sweltered through many a summers in our childhood,
Mm.
way above those temperatures. Okay, yes, it was unusually warm for a March, but we have had those temperatures consecutively in January for as long as I can remember as a kid.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I don't remember school ever closing, but I do remember my mum kept me home one day because she thought it was too hot. But it
Mm.
was a personal choice, and we chose that as a family. It
Yeah.
wasn't something that was placed upon us. It wasn't cancelled. It wasn't a council or a government making that decision. And this is where we are today.
Well, this is the official temperature data from the Bureau of Meteorology for March the 11th, 2024, a high of 36.2 degrees. That isn't exactly scorcher territory. That isn't exactly doom and gloom territory. Is it just me? Or is there a sense that we're hearing much more amped up rhetoric about normal weather than what we've ever heard before?
Yeah, I think so. You obviously were here during the Black Saturday fires,
Mm.
and they were catastrophic.
Mm.
And I don't actually think that the language that was used back then is even remotely close to the catastrophizing language that they're using today.
Mm.
And we had, you know, what those fires were like. It was absolutely awful. We lost many lives.
Mm.
But the language used then was not the same climate fear tactics that are being used today. And we're not seeing anywhere near the same weather or fires
Mm.
as those ones that
Well,
we saw in 2009.
Well, if my memory serves me correctly, and this wasn't intended to be about Black Saturday, so I haven't double checked. But if my memory serves me correctly, the police commissioner, who was also the person who was supposed to be in charge of emergency response on Black Saturday, went out to dinner. If my memory serves me correctly.
Yes, and a haircut.
Oh, sorry, I forgot. You can't have split ends during an emergency. That would just be a travesty for the press conference afterwards. Now, even Eddie Maguire has gotten on board this and called this out. Resilient as limp lettuce is how he's referred to this cancellation. What does it tell you when a man who has spent his entire life working very, very cushy indoor air-conditioned jobs thinks that you're a bit too soft in a heat wave?
I think maybe people should be paying attention to the fact that people like Eddie Maguire are coming out and saying things like that. And I think, Topher, you mentioned before, there was 300,000 odd people that turned out for Moomba regardless.
Yeah.
So, perhaps as you suggested, people aren't listening to the climate scare tactic narrative as much as we think they are, or certainly as much as the government is hoping that people will.
Well, that's an optimistic way to look at it. I hope you're right. I think more to the point, 300,000 people know what fun looks like and know that they can have it even on a 36.2 degree day. And the cancellation of the parade was clearly not something that was supported by the public, because the public got out there voluntarily. They could have stayed home. They could have gone somewhere else. They could have done anything they wanted, jumped into their deep freezer and closed the lid for a half an hour. Not recommended, by the way. When they talk about an ice bath, that's, don't go to that extreme. I mean, 300,000 people is a massive crowd of people. I don't believe it's quite a record for Moomba, but it's certainly a very, very substantial crowd for Moomba. These people were deprived a parade because, like you said before, someone else couldn't leave it up to them to manage their own risk and their own health in the heat. What does this say about the psychology and this sort of safety culture is now leading to this real kind of nanny, you can't have any fun culture?
100%. And that's what I noticed. One of the first things that I noticed when Sally Cap talked about the decision-making behind closing down the parade, and her focus was very much on the safety. And it was the safety of the community, but also the safety of the people that were going to be attending within the parade. And I just think that it was a gross overreaction, and you need to be able to let people decide for themselves. But if COVID's shown us anything, it showed us ultimately with the re-election of Daniel Andrews and a Labor government in Victoria that people seemingly are happy to live in a nanny state and to have a government tell them what they can and can't do, and to have somebody else make those decisions about their safety, because simply they're not interested in making them for themselves. But 300,000 people turning up, that's promising.
Well, I'm certainly hopeful that people are beginning to get sick and tired of being lectured and being kept safe, being wrapped in bubble wrap all of the time, but only time will tell. For now, Krystle, I share your frustration, and sadly, I don't have a solution to this problem either. We're just going to have to wait and see. Krystle Mitchell, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. Well, just say one last thing, Toph.
Sure. Yeah.
I remember... So during COVID, you were obviously one of the very first people to speak out about the injustices and the wrongdoing that the lockdowns were causing. So I just want to be the first one to call it on your show that climate lockdowns are possibly a thing of the future, and that people can call it a cooker conspiracy theory and all of those things, but I'm calling it now, and let's just wait and see what happens.
Well, I've learnt not to roll my eyes at cooker conspiracy theories. I remember the first time I showed up to an anti-lockdown protest, because that's what it was. It was anti-lockdown protests. And I saw the sign for the first time, no mandatory vaccines. And I rolled my eyes and I went, guys, can we just quit with the conspiracy? I ended up with egg on my face on that one. That is for sure. So I'm not going to roll my eyes at you, Krystle, and thank you very much for coming on.
Cheers, Toph. See you later.